Aloha everyone, Steve Tobis here, and today I'm going to share what I'm riding in what conditions, as well as how I tune my foils, so you kind of have an idea of where I'm riding my stuff, and then you can maybe apply that to your foils and help you get everything dialed in. So just kind of to preface all this, I'm 6'4", 180 pounds, riding in Maui. Our conditions are so unique to almost anywhere else in the world. I generally prefer a even to back-footed feel in my foils, especially when we're towing or winging, doing any of those real high-speed sports. My reason for that is if I'm riding a foil that's really front-footed and I'm putting all my weight into my front foot, there gets to a point where once you're fully loaded into your front foot and you're dropping down a face, if your foil's trying to push up, you have nothing more to hold that nose down and to keep your foil engaged and driving down the face of the wave. So your foil is just gonna push on you and overfoil and you blow up. Where if you have a more even to just slightly back-footed feel in your foil, it gives you a little bit more leverage and just a little bit more to push down on the nose and keep that foil running flat and engaged through the wave. That's why I generally tune my foils to ride middle or even-footed, if a touch back-footed. I don't like a super back-footed foil where all your weight's in your back foot and you get super tired. And I also don't like foils that are really front-footed where you're just all your weight's in your front foot, and if you can't push down anymore, then you're just done. But really, I just hope that this gives some information, some insight as to my tunings, why I'm riding them, what I'm using them for. So if anyone's trying to dial in their gear, just doesn't have it quite right, hopefully this can give you a starting point to really optimize your setup for yourself. Tuning your foils is super important. Yeah, they all work if you just put them together out of the box, but if you really want to optimize your riding and you want to squeeze every last bit of performance you can out of your setup, take the time to tune your gear. You know, I always ride with a wrench in my wetsuit so I can move my foil on my board. I have screwdrivers at the beach, you know, and shim kits so I can try different things, try new shims out. So if you're not testing your gear, you're leaving a lot of free opportunity on the table. So if you're not dialing and tuning your stuff, I would strongly recommend taking a session or two and just trying something new. Just experiment with it. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you put something together and you're like, wow, this is not the feeling I like in my foil. But at least then you know and you learn what you like and don't like. So then you can go back and, you know, put something together, and when you get it right and it feels good, you just get this free performance from your foil that is amazing. It lets you tap into another level of performance and efficiency. So to start with, for downwind foiling, my front wing of choice is the Progression 125. I absolutely love this foil. It's fast, it's quick, it's nimble, it surfs amazing. The range on it is really incredible. You know, I can run this thing super slow, and then I can give it a couple taps and just drop into the biggest open ocean swells out there. For the tail, I'm pairing it with, right now, the Progression 13.5 carbon tail. I run this at negative 0.25 degrees. It's a custom shim that we printed up. I found that by flattening the tail, I do give up a little bit of the low end and the pump from the foil, but I gain a dramatic amount of glide, which is everything for downwinding. I've also been playing around with the Shunt 13. This tail, you know, it has a lot of camber in it, so it's a very front-footed feel. And what I can do to move that pressure back to my back foot is I can flatten out the tail and make it do a little less work in the system. So this is something that I'm playing around with, kind of my experiment of choice right now. I'm still trying to dial this in. You know, it doesn't quite feel how I like. There's some cool characteristics in here that I think we can apply to our riding. For prone foiling, I'm running the Progression 125 and pretty much everything waist to chest high. I found I prefer the Shiv 13 tail for surf. Just having that little narrower span than the Progression 13.5 tail gives it a little better roll. And I found that with the 125, I run a little more shim angle in my tail. So I'm surfing usually 1 degree, whereas I'm downwinding, you know, a negative quarter degree. So really what I'm finding with when I'm proning this foil or stand-up paddling this foil in the waves is I'm trying to slow it down. I'm trying to let it sit a little deeper in the pocket, a little more in the energy. And that's more of a personal choice, a personal preference. I like to try to ride the wave, you know, trough to peak, as opposed to shoulder to foam in a sense. I like to try to, you know, surf more vertically if I can, as opposed to out and back. Putting in a little more shim angle slows this guy down, lets it sit in the pocket a little better, and then just gives me that low end for, you know, when you break the foil out or carve, to catch and engage a little sooner. When the waves are small, basically anything under waist high, I'm going to the progression 140. And again, pairing it with the Shiv 13 tail for surf and downwind too. Our South Shore in Kihei, we get these really steep, short period, choppy bumps that are really fun to surf. So for that run, taking something a little bit slower and a little more surf oriented is a lot more fun than taking like a Maliko setup like the 125, which wants to go straight and fast. So I'll run this Shiv 13 with the progression 140, usually 1 to 2 degrees depending on conditions. If I want to speed the foil up a little bit, then I'll go to 1 degree. And if I want to go slow and just really sit deep in the pocket and have a ton of turn control, then I'll go 2 degrees. I feel like I can stand on this foil with like no ground speed. It's almost like it's just levitating, hovering me there, ready for the next bump. So really fun setup when it gets small. So now talking about winging and towing. These two disciplines, I find I ride a very similar, if not identical setup, because they kind of are fundamentally similar in the sense where you're riding really fast, you're riding high speeds, and you're putting yourself into bigger waves where you have a lot of energy. And for that, my choice is the Vyper 90. This foil is crazy fast, super fun, and I like to pair it with the Shiv 13 tail. Now this setup, depending on what I'm doing and the conditions I'm riding in, I'll go anywhere from a 1/2 degree tail shim up to like 2.5 degrees. Really, it's all based off of conditions and the energy in the ocean. So if it's big, double overhead, pumping energy, there's just a lot of water moving, I'll run this at either a 1/2 or 1 degree just to speed everything up, where I want to go as fast as I possibly can. I have all the energy in the wave to keep the foil engaged and moving. I just need to run. If it's a little bit smaller, like in the head high range or so, then giving a little more tail angle helps the Vyper 90 stay up and stay engaged, and helps with stability. You need a little bit of tail input to correct your front wing. And that's where running this, 2 degrees, 1.5 degrees, to me just feels a little bit better. For winging, I ride a very similar setup, kind of same thing. If it's really fast, there's a lot of wind, there's big waves, I'll flatten out the tail, running a 1/2 or 1 degree. And if it's a little more mellow day or not going as fast, then I'll put a little more tail angle in just to help the front wing out and to keep everything going. As far as fuses go, I pretty much exclusively run the medium fuse. I run the short occasionally if I'm like winging or towing in smaller waves and I have, a bigger front wing that I want to really get a lot of surfiness out of. But generally I found that I tend to prefer the stability and control over the longer fuse than the snappiness and response of the shorter fuse. And this is all just a rider preference. Some people like riding really short fuses. I personally like a little bit longer fuse that I can really push on and pull around. And then I found that the longer fuse helps your pump. So for downwinding, I found with the shorter fuse, my cadence was a little too fast and I wasn't getting an optimal pump out of the foils. As far as masts, I'm running the 75 Katana for downwind, prone, stand-up foiling, and I'm running the progression 800 for towing and winging. For downwinding, I like to ride a short mast. And the reason for that is because I can ride the foil a lot higher to the surface of the water. And if I get low, say you have 2 boards that are even elevation out of the water, one has a long mast and one has a short mast. The one with the short mast is gonna have less drag when those boards are low in the water than the guy with the long mast. So for downwinding and racing, drag reduction is everything. So every little bit of performance I can gain by shrinking that mast, I'm gonna take. I also find it's easier to paddle up on foil when you have that shorter mast. The long mast, I find the lifting moment from the foil seems kind of far away from the board and it wants to rock back and forth more. So I found that having that shorter mast, for me, it felt a little easier and a little more consistent for me to paddle up out of the water. The Progression 800 mast I found is awesome for winging, for towing. It's really stiff. So even on like the wider foils, the 125, the 140, when I'm really pushing on those wingtips, I don't feel the flex in the mast. I pretty much only tow the 800 or 80 centimeter length mast. Going bigger into like a 950 or even longer into like some big wave masts, there becomes a problem where they almost get too locked in, where there's too much mast section in the water and it gets really difficult to turn and maneuver those foils. It does give you the benefit if you have a lot of chop in the water where you don't have to navigate it and you can just cut right through it. But if your waves are a little smoother, a little more groomed, I can get away with an 800 Masts, and to me, it feels a lot better than riding like a 950. Thanks for watching, appreciate it. Hopefully this video helped out and gave some insight as to what I'm riding in what conditions. If you have any questions, leave a comment. Aloha.